Puppetmaster Dorian is going to break the meta wide open and create one of the most lethal formats in a long time. Hi peeps, I'm Stormy, ranked among the top 1000 for Legend consistently, and I'll be reviewing the Whizbang Miniset. I'll provide some theory-crafted decks in this video for Rogue, where I feel Dorian's impact will be the most felt, with tons of damage from hand, or crazy combos, but I think you will find a place in any deck that wants to run big minions, like Reno Shaman, Mech Warrior, Hand Buff Paladin, etc., but not more aggressive lists such as Remy, Priest, Hunter, or Flood Paladin. After that, I'll go over each of the mini set cards, what I think about their meta impact will be, if any, give them a rating based on how I think they will affect the immediate meta before the next expansion, though I will mention any future potential that they may have. So first up, we'll go over Puppetmaster Dorian. He's a 4 mana 2/6 with the effect after you draw a minion, get a 1/1 copy of it that costs 1. It's important to note that with this effect you will get a copy in your hand, so it's very usable with battle cries. I believe this card will fundamentally change the meta and warp it around it, like more so than Brand does now. I can very easily see this going to 6 mana in the future, maybe even like an emergency patch similar to the Azurite Snake nerf. Now you may be wondering, what could be so broken about this card? Well, I can see a few different options for its use. I'll be using the theory crafted rogue lists as examples, but keep in mind these lists are not optimized or refined at all, and it'll take testing to see which cards are worth running and if each deck is competitively viable, so craft at your own risk. So the first deck focuses on extreme amounts of draw with Puppetmaster Dorian and potentially Sonya, though she isn't necessary to deal direct damage to your opponent very quickly in 1 or 2 turns depending on your draw. This focuses on abusing cards like Alexstrasza to set your opponent's health to 15, MC Blingtron for additional damage, so this probably isn't necessary, direct damage from Nostalgic Clown and Sunspot Dragon, which can deal tons of damage from hand, and the tradable effect on Sunspot allows you to trade it back to your deck to get additional copies as well. And Rogue also has cards like Gear Shift and Gaslight Gatekeeper to shuffle cards back into your deck. The balance between this will be if there's enough removal and sustainability to reach those big combo turns against aggro. With cards like Shadow Step to bring back your Puppetmaster Dorian, you can get healing off cards like Sunspot and then still have your combo piece. You can also have Sandbox Scoundrel to discount your cards to allow you more flexible combos. This deck shows a lot of promise, but if it works, I'm sure it'll be very hated. Deck 2 is more of a hybrid list. It features both direct damage from cards like Sunspot and Alexstrasza, but also features cards like Playhouse Giant and Mountain Giant to come down for cheap for a more early game swing and less focused on combo. It also features a potential combo with Glyphro the Artist and Ragnaros the Firelord, which you can shuffle both back into your deck if you draw them early to hit a guaranteed full board of Rags with a 1 mana Glyphro, but this may not be worth running. However, if you're dealing damage in the same turn with battle cries, and even if your opponent has minions, a rag will likely still give you lethal. Your board should be easily filled with 1 mana 1/1, so this gives you a way to get value out of them, and even hitting something like a giant isn't the worst thing if you're only paying 1 mana for it. However, this would transform your Puppetmaster unless you Shadow Stepped or Breakdanced it first. This deck seems a bit more fair, but it still has big potential to cheat out huge stats early along with lots of combo damage. Deck 3 is more focused on the Glyphro and Ragnaros combos of Win Condition. It drops more of the minions and adds some additional removal and spells. However, this does conflict with Magatha even as a 1 mana draw 5, so it may be worth considering cutting. But most of the spells aren't that important if you give your opponent some of them, so as long as you have more draw on the back. And this deck has a flexible early game plan that may help it stabilize better against aggro, but its late game combos less consistent damage, relying on the specific combo entirely. I think this will be too niche to see widespread playing success, but maybe the most memey and fun. Deck 4 is what I call the most tame list. It uses the existing Mining Rogue framework as a game plan and only adds in Sunspot Dragon alongside Dorian and Sonya for its burst damage. There's also potential to change up the Ziliax to either a more expensive model like the Poisonous Perfection model that a 1/1 version would still be useful for, or a summon copy version for additional annoying taunts, or the buff buff, +1/+1 Ziliax version for additional burst and board staying power. If decks 1 through 3 don't end up working out, I think Puppetmaster Dorian will still find a home in regular Mining Room just because of the sheer potential when combined with Sonya. Now, as you can see from these different lists, there's a lot of possibility with Dorian, but I believe it's got more potential than just in Rogue, though that class may have the greatest use for it. Other classes I can see using it is Warrior, whether it's in Mech Warrior or Arena Warrior. If it survives the nerf, it can be played with any number of draw cards, leading to other draw cards such as Stone Skin Armor or Magatha to give massive discounts. I can see this being used to get cheap versions of mechs to die or trigger their death rattles for both Inventor Boom as well as the weapon Boom Wrench. You can get an additional Boom Boss. Basically any draw of this card will be very good. I can see the new card Safety Expert being very good with this, as you can get 9 bombs with the weapon and the 1 mana copy in a single turn. And then you get additional bombs with the normal copy and resummon copies from Inventor Boom, providing massive damage. In Reno Warrior, it may just be worth to get a cheap version of Brands. You don't have to spend a turn playing an 8 mana Brand or an additional Boom Boss. If you do both, you could play Bran and then play 2 Boom Bosses in the same turn, shuffling in 12 TNTs, which would be very devastating. Reno Shaman can benefit from the additional copies of Shutterblock or another Dr. Holiday to protect against weapon removal or Ignis, etc. Reno Priest can get additional copies of Release or Amanthul, can even Power Card Synchronize the Creation Protocol for additional copies of Puppetmaster Dorian, and Big Paladin could potentially become a real deck, using Dorian to get cheap copies of its big minions for their effects while still cheating them out, or get another Kangor to go infinite. So as you can see, there are a ton of possibilities for this card, and I believe it'll be ran in any deck that wants cheap copies of its big minions, so I'm giving it 5 stars out of 5. Now I'll go over the rest of the cards revealed in the mini set. I won't go into as much detail as I did for Puppetmaster Dorian because I don't think there will be as meta warping, but I will give each of them a rating and where I think they can find a home in a deck, if any. I'll go over each of the class cards first and then the neutrals. So first is Priest, who got at least 1 good card, but the first card, Delayed Product, is not it. Now, Delayed Product is a really weird card, and I don't see it having a niche. Like, playing it on turn 4 means you're skipping turn 4 and it won't have an impact for 2 turns. Even if you do high roll, which the high rolls aren't even that great, most of the time you're just going to get a stat bomb, which Priest really isn't looking for and isn't going to be very impactful by turn 6 on the earliest. And drawing this any later also feels bad, although it can kind of act as like a pseudo sticky minion that isn't easily removed. You'd rather just have any better card that has immediate impact. I'm giving this 1 out of 5 stars. Next we have Funhouse Mirror. Now Funhouse Mirror is a weird card. It's like a bad Reverberations but for Priest. It can trade evenly or it can get you some Titan value, but it isn't the most impressive. Any death rattle or any other effect you get, your opponent will also get. I can see maybe a Reno Priest running this as a situational card, but even then it might not make the cut. I'm giving it 2 out of 5 stars. Finally, for Priest, we have Puppet Theater. Puppet Theater looks like a really strong card, and it can make Reno Priest and maybe Overheal Priest stronger archetypes as more valid options compared to just Serene Priest. I don't see Serene Priest running it, as they just have better things to do for 4 mana, and it can't even target your own minions, but having a convert that you can just pay for in advance and have 2 charges will be very strong for any slower Priest deck, and it'll make your opponents not want to play their best cards in anticipation of you copying them. Though one thing to note from the comparison to convert is that this version does only come with 1/1 in stats, but this isn't as much of a downside as you want the effects of the battle cards mainly when using this card. So I'm giving this card 4 out of 5 stars. Very good. Next we have Hunter. Hunter got a new secret and some really good secret support, which I can definitely see getting played, but the first card, Wilderness Pact, probably won't. Now Wilderness Pact's a weird card. It can be like a 1-turn value bomb in the late game to just try and fill out a turn, or it can be something you play early to try and get something just fill out your curve and you don't have any better options. Either way, it seems pretty mediocre. It does have some synergy with like Gaslight Gatekeeper just as a way to like fill up your hand and draw cards, although if you redraw any of these random beats throughout the game, I imagine you're probably going to be pretty sad. But since this card is 1 mana and you could combo it with Puppetmaster Dorian and Gaslight Gatekeeper to get a handful of cheap cards to play, it adds a little bit of potential, but I don't know what you'd really want copies of. We don't really have a late game Hunter, but maybe you could run this combo in Reno Hunter or Egg Hunter. For that combo alone, I'll give it 2 out of 5 stars for its potentials, but I don't think it'll see any major play. Now, Bargain Bin's a really good secret since there's basically no way to play around it unless you just don't play the game. It's essentially a 2-mana draw 2, though it is delayed by 1 turn. I could see this getting played in basically every Hunter deck, even though those don't go for a secret package. It's just really efficient. Interesting thing to note is that if you play Puppetmaster Dorian with this card, if they don't have an immediate way to kill it on board, you will get immediate value as soon as they play a card to answer it. So that's another point for Dorian in Hunter decks. Overall, just really solid card. Probably see play in just about every Hunter deck. I expect Hunter to still be solid in the meta, but it's not completely meta defining, so I'll give it a 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5 stars. Product 9 looks like a really good secret support card, and Hunter just got another really good secret, which makes this even better. But to see how much impact it'll really have on the meta, we have to look at all the other secret support cards for Hunter, as you aren't just running this for Bargain Bin alone. It's important to note it's triggered secret, so while using Observer of Mysteries may be a valid strat, if the opponent just avoids triggering them, you won't be able to recast them. For this reason, we want to look at secrets that aren't easily played around. Bargain Bin, as we said before, it's possible not to trigger, so that's easy. We also have Freezing Trap, which will have to be triggered eventually because it's any attack. Though if the meta is filled with Puppetmaster Dorian, then there'll be a lot of 1/1s on boards with battle cries, so it may not be worth running. Explosive Trap will get triggered eventually, but it's very easy to play around, and you may not want to wait around for it to be triggered. Ice Trap is solid, though it's only a tempo swing since it doesn't delete the spell like Counterspell, so how good it is will vary greatly. It might not be worth main decking. Bait and Switch is always pretty annoying to deal with and can almost be guaranteed to activate if you run any taunt, so I'd say it's solid, although when you recast it they will be able to play around it. Rat Trap just requires too much. You do get a 6/6, but if your opponent's playing 3 cards in a turn, they're probably creating a big enough swing that a 6/6 doesn't matter that much unless it's like early against aggro. All these main deck secrets can be drawn with Costume Singer, which is a good card, so if you main deck secrets you do have easy access to draw them. We also have Titan Forge Traps, which is a solid discover and cast secrets. So it can help you get secrets that are a bit more relevant to your situation, and if you're running a slower deck, it also allows you to put in Ignis without throwing in bad Forge cards. The last 3 secret support cards for Hunter are the Spellstone, the Lesser Emerald Spellstone for stat bombs, which can be a decent swing. Harmonica Soloist, which you'll probably never play because you're playing Hunter and you always want minions on board. Starstrung Bow can easily come down for cheap, and then it can also be tutored with Instrument Tech, so that's a lot of potential early game damage. So there are decent secrets and a few decent support cards available for Hunter, but is it going to be playable as its own standalone deck? I'm going to say not in its entirety. I think taking the early turns off to play secrets isn't going to be what Hunter wants to do, and a lot of your secrets are more situational and requires your opponent to play into them for your cards to have big effects. I can see potential for a small secret package being put into decks like Aggro Hunter and Reno Hunter of just like Bargain Bin, Titan Forge Traps, maybe an Observer of Mysteries, Product 9, and Starstrung Bow. This provides you some different versatility while still having a big potential payoff, and leaves you still able to execute your early game plans, with the option to play Ignis without having to run the worst Forge cards. I don't see a pure secret deck working, so for that I'm giving Product 9 3 out of 5 stars. Next we have Mage, who did not get any secret support, but did get some very exciting support for Spell Mage, both directly and indirectly. The first card, Dark Moon Magician, is more indirect support. Now the reason I say it's more indirect support is because it's a 3-drop that can be easily discovered off Spot the Difference as a very solid minion. It's sticky because it's elusive, and it can also provide some random spells to go with your own, which is usually good. I'm not going to go over the entire spell pool, but you can manipulate this to try and get what you want, especially in the higher cost department as there are limited options. As for its application for not being randomly generated, I'm not sure how good it'll be. It may find a home in Rainbow or Mana Storm Mage if those decks are playable. I don't really see this card pushing it any more forward than it already is. Overall, it's just like a decent solid 3-drop, so I'll give it 3 out of 5 stars. Next is Malfunction, which is the mage card I'm the most excited for. Obviously, non-spell mage is completely garbage, right? It does make the Discover pool worse for other decks, but for Spell Mage, it's an amazing early game clear. Especially against decks like Token Hunter and Flood Paladin, which run a lot of low health minions. It makes it being an arcane spell school is both an upside and a downside. It will make your stargazing draw this, which may be what you want in some cases, but if you're running a light show package, it will make that a bit more inconsistent. I'm really excited for this card, and I think Spell Mage is a really fun archetype, and I want it to be playable, and this early game board clear is just what it needed. Whether it'll be enough, I'm not sure, but I'm hopeful with this great card. 4 out of 5 stars. Now the last mage card is buy one get one freeze, which is a funny pun, but the card itself isn't the best. It's essentially a worse reverberations in most cases, as you get a frozen copy, which means if you use it on a Titan, they won't be able to use their ability that turn, and you can't use it on a charge or a rush minion to trade either. Freezing is also notoriously much worse than killing, at least most of the time, which Reverb often enabled you to do. The only redeeming factor of this card is that it's a frost spell. It has some synergy with Watercolor Artist to reduce it to 0, which can enable your Sif shenanigans earlier than you could with Reverb. I don't think this will bring Rainbow back, but it's good in that one specific case. It'll be interesting to see if this card sees play once Reverberation rotates, but until then, I don't see it seeing that much play. But it isn't totally useless, so 2 out of 5 stars. Demon Hunter got some interesting cards, so I don't think this first card, Return Policy, really has a home. Return Policy is a Death Rattle synergistic card, but at the current moment, Demon Hunter doesn't really have any good cards to use this with, and a 3 mana that's not really cheap for its effect either. So it's not something you want to slot in unless you can make a very good payoff with it. The only card I can see that can maybe make this worth running is CCG, which is often cited as being too slow because of its death rattle, and people say it would be ran as a battle cry. So with this card you can essentially run it as a battle cry, but to get full value out of it you'll need a lot of hand space. So this could be a good hand refill for Demon Hunter cards as opposed to using a card like Hearthstone Brew. The big weakness with this is that it's a 2-card combo, and the other cards like Ball Hog or Umpire's Grasp aren't the greatest to hit, and the neutral Death Rattles aren't that great either. I don't think you want an infinite floppy Hydra deck or a big elemental deck or to steal a minion with Sylvanas, but it could be good meme potential. I don't think it'll be competitive. If they print new Death Rattle support, it may find a place. Maybe Reno Demon Hunter will elect to run a copy of it, but I don't see it making a huge impact in the current meta. 2 out of 5 stars. Next we have a really scary card, Sock Puppet Slither Spear. It's a cheap 1 mana 1/3 Naga that can gain a bunch of attack very easily and deal a ton of damage. It is vulnerable on your opponent's turn, but if they can't deal with it immediately, then its value will already been exploited, as this card can just push a massive amount of damage so quickly. This is also just a cheap Naga for Sharpshooter DH, so it could bring that deck back as well, as a lot of what it's lacking is cheap Nagas in that deck. Overall, I think this will be ran in just about every Demon Hunter deck. 5 out of 5 stars. Now, Gibbering Reject is a very interesting card. I don't rate it off like some people do because of its sheer potential. Obviously, immediately with any attack, whether it's a weapon you already had on turn 4 or 1 mana hero power, you're getting 6/6 worth of stats, which isn't the strongest for turn 4, but it's an immediate must kill, because if they don't kill it, it'll immediately become 12 worth of stats with 4 of these, and then it can just fill up your board. And if they don't answer it, they just lose. It just keeps going up and up and up, and it just keeps coming back. And if you combine this with going down swinging, then you can immediately get a full board of these. It's just very cheap for a lot of stats, and if you don't kill them all, they can just easily refill the board. It's a single card that demands a board clear, which can be very powerful and save you future boards, and it can come down early enough to be relevant. Now this card isn't great off of Shopper Discovery because you don't want to play it that late for that much mana, but it's still okay. Honestly, I think this is a slept down card. I think it's pretty solid. I'm gonna give it 3 out of 5 stars. Now on the Warrior, which has some very good mech support, which I think can bring it into relevance, especially with the likely brand nerf on the way. Now the first card, Safety Expert, is really interesting, introducing bombs back into standard. Now you never really want to be playing this card for 10 mana. This is a high priority target for copying with Puppetmaster Dorian, as the 1 mana version will still shuffle in 3 bombs and be put into the pool for Inventor Boom to resummon. You can also combo it with the weapon Boom Wrench in a single turn, shuffling up to 9 bombs into your opponent's deck. It's also a good card for the other new card, Part Scrapper, to discount, but we'll get to that one next. This card has potential to shuffle a lot of damage into your opponent's deck, though it's important to note that playing Boom Boss with this can destroy the bombs in your opponent's deck. But I imagine you'll still be playing both anyways, since you can get a 1 mana Boom Boss copy as well. Brand may even still be worth running, since you can get a discounted copy, but I suspect the non-brand version will do a bit better. Overall, I think this will be a solid card in Mech Warrior, giving it 3 out of 5 stars. Now, Part Scrapper is a really excellent card. It's a much better mana cheat card compared to Chemical Spill with only the small cost of armor, which Warrior has plenty of access to. I think this card will bring Mech Warrior into meta relevance, combined with Puppetmaster Dorian, allowing you to cheat out your big mechs for cheap and very early. It's also not only on the same turn, which means you can pull out something like a Bot Face or Safety Expert on turn 4 or 5. It can very easily combine with Testing Dummy for 1, which can allow you to play it with Boom Wrench and its mini very easily. A very strong card that will be a major force in Mech Warrior, which I believe will be a top meta deck. 5 out of 5 stars. The final Warrior card is Standardized Pack, which has some potential merits with Dorian and Gaslight Gatekeeper, but Warrior doesn't usually have trouble filling its hand with cards, so this probably won't see any play even for that purpose. Top minions aren't particularly that useful. It's a bit too broad to be useful. If it gave mechs instead, you could get some of the useful class mechs like Paladin or Rogue, but in its current state, I don't think it'll find a home anywhere. 1 out of 5 stars. Now Shaman. Shaman got a very solid 1-drop and some other niche options that have a small chance of seeing play, but Murloc Grofin is just chef's kiss. I think this will see play in every Shaman deck. It's 2-tune stats as a 1-drop with half of it being Rush, which trades very well to a lot of the tokens generated by Hunter, as well as Flood Paladin minions. It also scales well with buffs, which upon a star scales this up to a 3-4 that summons another 3-4. The Gigantify is also just very solid, as Shaman doesn't really have a great play on 8 most of the time. Ziliax and Rena are on 9, so getting a free 8-8 and another 8-8 with Rush is a lot of pressure, and it gets even bigger with Wish Upon a Star. Overall, it's just an amazing 1-drop that's very flexible. 5 out of 5 stars. Now, Rocket Hopper is a big boy, 5 mana, and it has immediate impact thanks to Rush, but the overload on it is crippling. It basically has to be paired with Overdraft in the next turn, or it's just way too steep of a cost. I'm sure some people will try out Rocket Hopper and Overdraft and Reno Shaman, maybe running a few other Overload cards for additional synergy. I don't think it's compelling enough to play any sort of Overload package. If they add more support for a dedicated Overload Shaman in the future, then this card would definitely be run. I'm gonna give it 2 out of 5 stars just for its future potential. Now, Wave of Nostalgia is an interesting card. It brings into question whether an aggressive Shaman list that also generates tokens with cards like Pop-Up Book and then using this and potentially like Conductivity plus Jive Insect combo to win. I'm not confident in that deck being great, because when I try to make a similar deck, you just don't have enough steam to keep you going. And while Spirit Claws is a great card, there just aren't a lot of spell damage minions in Standard right now for it to be very consistent. The other side of this card is using it more of a tech card, kind of like a devolve but worse, which wouldn't be great against most decks except for Mech Warrior. If Mech Warrior becomes a meta threat, like I suspect they will be, you could considering running this as a tech card, maybe in your ETC, but its high cost means you have to get it out of turn early or just rely on your generations being better and having some ability to answer theirs, because it'll take up your whole turn otherwise. Because it has a slim chance of seeing some niche play, I'll give it 2 out of 5 stars. Now, Paladin got some solid cards across the board, with only one that doesn't really seem to have a current niche, but it definitely has big potential in the future to be a really solid card. Holy Glow Sticks is just really solid removal and healing, since this discount is relatively easy to fulfill, and even if you don't, it's not the absolute worst thing to use. This could see play in both aggro, hand buff, and Reno, though I suspect that Reno will get the most mileage out of it since it tends to run the most holy spells. But since it has the ability to go face, going Hand of a Doll or Crusader Aura and a Holy Glow Sticks will be a solid option for more aggressive decks. Overall, it's a really solid card, 4 out of 5 stars. Now, Flickering Lightbot is a card with a lot of potential, but at the current moment, you don't really run that many holy spells, and there isn't enough of a payoff to be worth running. Every time I look at this card, I'm like, oh, a Lightbot, so it probably has Divine Shield, but it never does, and this leaves me feeling disappointed every time I see it. Even getting this down to 0 mana does not feel that great as a vanilla 3/3. And while it provides the bigger 8/8 to get discounted, which is useful for keeping your hand full of minions for say hand buff, it's just gonna come down too slow. It is a mech though, and Paladin does have a lot of good mechs in standard right now, but I don't think it's one of the mechs you want to be running. You'd rather be running less holy spells for Magatha to be more consistent. If more good holy spells are added, I can see this card being run. I do wish I had Divine Shield or something, just be a bit better than just a stat bomb. I'll give it 3 out of 5 stars for its potential in the future, but I think the mech tag is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. And Whack-A-Null is a really solid card. I think that I'll see play in just about every Paladin deck. It's the Runes of Darkness. It doesn't have a corpse requirement. It's very powerful, and basically any option you hit with a +1/+1 will be worth playing. This may only be seen as a 1-of, since multiple weapons can sometimes be hard to get value out of, but I think it'll always be solid whenever it's played. I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars because I think you'll see play in every Paladin deck, but it won't be a meta definer. Now, Rogue got one really excellent card and then a couple of mediocre ones. However, they did get what is the best pack of the set. That is the Twisted Pack. Now, the Twisted Pack is definitely the best of the packs, and it may be playing as just a 1-of to fill up your hand to Gaslight Gatekeeper away to search for your Puppetmaster Dorian, or to get about additional value off its draw. The random cards can include hero cards, which could make for some great moments. It definitely has the most potential of the packs, but I'm not sure that Rogue really needs it, but there's a chance it could see a small amount of play, so I'll give it 2 out of 5 stars. Next up is Dubious Purchase. The best Rogue card mini set fits perfectly with draw heavy strategy that they want to play with Puppetmaster Dorian. It's a great target to hit with prep. It provides some additional removal to help you not get run over. I see it being run as a 2-of in most, if not all, Rogue decks, and being a metal combo enabler. 5 out of 5 stars. Dust Bunny is a really odd card because it can have very good high rolls or very bad low rolls. And attached to a 3 mana 3/2, even with 2 rolls on both a Battle Cry and a Death Rattle, I don't think this card finds a spot in your decks. You know, Wishing Well Rogue may consider running it just for a chance to discover an extra coin, but that deck isn't meta relevant, and this card certainly won't help it become meta relevant. Aside from that one niche case, I don't see this card really finding a home. You have better things you want to do with your mana than spending it on like a banana or a knife, and you have other ways of generating coins. And while Rock is nice to have, it's not worth running this card. I give it 1 out of 5 stars. Death Knight got a great new weapon that can fit into every deck, as well as some hand buff stuff that, while decent, I don't think it'll be enough to push the deck into relevancy, as all of Death Knight's still in a rough spot since the nerfs, and with the large amount of lethality that I'm predicting, Death Knight will be in a rough spot without enough healing or ways to increase their max health. Now, Toy Snatching Geist is a really solid hand buff card, able to provide some really efficient mana cheat, as well as giving you another minion to hit with your hand buffs with even more mana cheat. But I don't think it'll be enough to push the hand buff into meta relevance. However, if the deck is able to work, it will be because of this card, so I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 stars for its high potential. The only reason I'm not rating it higher is just not that great of a card, and it's not going to completely enable hand buff. Now, Helm of Humiliation seems really underwhelming, with both its double blood rune cost, which restricts it to basically just a blood unholy deck, and that deck doesn't really want to be running hand buffs as much because it just wants to control the board with cards like Corpse Explosion and Soul Stealer. In addition to that, it's 4 mana for a single target removal that isn't even guaranteed to remove, as it won't kill any big targets, and while the buff is nice, it's just 1 minion. So if you miss your value targets, it'll feel even worse. If a card like Asphyxiate doesn't see any play, which is just better removal than this for 1 less mana, then this card doesn't stand a chance. I could see this card going to 3 mana and still not being ran, so at its current state, I'd say it's pretty much unplayable. 1 out of 5 stars. Now, Foam Render is the opposite of unplayable. It might be the one card capable of carrying the dead carcass of the Death Knight class, as it's essentially a permanent 5 damage weapon, as well as a Corpse Spender for Rainbow. It'll probably only be run at 1 copy, since the second one isn't really needed unless it's Fightbird, but you'll also have a chance of discovering this from Runes of Darkness or Primus. And the amount of pressure you'll be able to generate with this card alone will win you games as you whittle your opponent down. It'll add a much faster game plan to win with in Blood Unholy, and it'll heavily support your gameplay in Rainbow as well. Truly, if any card can save Death Knight, it's this one. 5 out of 5 stars. Warlock got a wide variety of cards. It's hard to tell if they'll see play or not. They have potential, but they also have downsides. But there are a few places they could fit. Domino Effect has a lot of potential for removal for only 3 mana. It might be good enough to enable like a slower control Warlock to be possible, or provide some great support to the Excavate Warlock, which I think could be very good with Puppetmaster Dorian in the coming meta. Getting additional cheap copies of your Excavates and your bounce effects. Overall, I think it's a solid removal option in the toolkit, and more early game removal is always good to have. 3 out of 5 stars. Now, Infernal is a great callback to Draxus, but as the actual card, it has some potential for Pain Lock, but with the amount of lethality I predict in this meta, it'll have a tough time. A 4-mana 6/6 also isn't that impressive for its massive potential downside, even if it does have taunt, and Forge of Wills is still in the gutter, so it's hard to say it'll be a great deck. I don't think this will have a great impact, but for its small potential, I'll give it 2 out of 5 stars. Now, Mass Production is an odd card. It's a very efficient draw at the cost of 3 life, but it shuffles 2 copies of itself. This may be good to use in combination with Puppetmaster Dorian for cheap draw, but it also fill your deck with more Mass Productions, which you don't really want to draw. It's like trading a Snake Oil for 2 cards, but you shuffle an extra Snake Oil into your deck. I could see having some niche uses for game plans that don't plan on going late, but the longer the game goes on, the worse this is going to get, as you'll just be dumping life to cycle these cards to get your actual cards, while also having to burn mana and fill up your hand with a bunch of useless cards. For that reason, you probably don't want to use this card more than a couple times unless you absolutely have to. I'm going to give it 2 stars out of 5 for its slight use cases. Druid got some Treant support, which hasn't really been playable since rotation, and some more generic minions that seem overall good on their own. Snuggle Teddy's fine as like an anti-aggro card for 3 mana. The gigantic version seems a bit cumbersome, but the elusive will at least make it a bit harder to remove. I think it's overall an okay card. I can definitely see it being run in Reno Druid, though Dragon Druid probably has better options available. Not that bad or good. I'll give it 3 stars out of 5. Torantis fits the same thing as the Snuggle Teddy, but for much later in the game, and although it can be a lot bigger for only 6 mana, it lacking lifesteal does hurt it a fair amount, so it doesn't work as well as an anti-aggro card, but it can still be a solid threat on its own when you play it past turn 10 against a lot of decks as a taunt elusive 14/14. This card is worse earlier than something like Snuggle Teddy, but a lot better later, which is a fair trade-off. I can see this making the cut in Reno Druid and non-Dragon Druid lists, so I'll give it 3 out of 5 stars. Now, Overgrown Beanstalk is a really good Treant support card, but most of the Treant support rotated, so this doesn't really have a deck to go into anymore. I don't think this can alone revive the deck, but if more Treant support gets added, this will be a major component in it. For its sheer potential, I have to give it points, but I don't believe you'll see any meta play at the moment, so I'll give it 3 stars out of 5. Though if there was more Treant support available, I could easily see this card being a 5 out of 5. Now finally, we have the neutrals. I won't be going over Puppetmaster Dorian again, but I will cover the rest. But only a couple of them seem to have any chance of meta impact. Pro Gamer, it's a really funny card, but obviously It's incredibly high rolly, giving it only a 1/3 chance of drawing 2 cards, a 1/3 chance of giving your opponent 2 cards, or just 1/3 chance of doing nothing. So even in a mill deck, this would have a 1/3 chance of being useless. Definitely not meta relevant in any way, but a fun card nonetheless, and I'm glad they printed it. 1 out of 5 stars. Explodeneer is a card I can see having some meta relevance, not only as being a good generation from Spot the Difference and Spell Mage, but also as a decent card on its own. If the meta becomes hyper draw focused, trying to take advantage of Puppetmaster Dorian, I can see this as being a solid tech card in aggro decks as a pseudo battle cry, deal fire to the enemy hero. It's also a pseudo must kill to prevent the damage from stacking. As for other decks, I could see this maybe seeing play in Mech Warrior just so you have more bombs, but you may just want more early removal and draw compared to this. Overall, a solid card that could definitely be a small meta force. I'll give it 3 out of 5 stars. Now, Building Block Golem it's just disappointing. I really have no idea why it isn't a mech, which could give it like some relevant synergies, and maybe you could see play in like a Flood Paladin or a Hand Buff Paladin with mechs, but as it currently stands, I don't see it having any sort of impact. They're just better cards available mostly. It does have immediate impact and it's theoretically sticky, but it has such low health it's almost always gonna die into whatever you trade into, and then the 1-cost minions can be cleared away fairly easily. I'm giving it 1 out of 5 stars. Blizzard, please fix. The Replicator Innator is a great reference, and I think this card has some solid potential as well. It's 3 minions in 1, the stats are decent across all of them for the cost, it's a mech, and it summons you copies of your minions. So I think this can be a very solid slot into Hand Buff Paladin, as you can buff the different parts and manipulate your minions to get big copies, as well as attaching your magnetics to both this and the copies. It's also a decent card with your Puppetmaster Dorian, as you can get more summons from the 1/1 copies, which can then have a big impact if it's something like Ragnaros or a Therazane for very cheap. This can also be solid in Mech Warrior. We can get copies of your Safety Expert or your Testing Dummy to get their Death Rattle effects. Overall, a very solid card that I think we'll see play in a variety of decks. I'm giving it a solid 4 out of 5 stars. If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video. Comment down below what you think the meta will be like and how you think my takes are. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe. I plan on posting more Hearthstone content in the future, in addition to general gaming videos, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.